Hey, welcome to another Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis, the show that takes you on the deep dive of the happenings of the hospitality scene. If you're new here, hi, welcome. If you're old here, hi, welcome back. I'm so excited that you joined us here today. This is actually my last live show here from Tony and Joe's. I'm so grateful that Greg Casten and his fabulous team have invited us to be here for the last month, and we've had amazing interviews and not really amazing weather, much to everybody's chagrin, but it's totally, spring in DC. But just a little reminder about Tony and Joe's. It's here at the bottom of Georgetown at the Georgetown Harbor. It is one of the premier patios in the DC metro area. When that sun comes out, you want to get here early because it is one of the first ones to fill up. As I've mentioned, you will find me with my bottle of rosé and a whole bunch of shucked oysters because Greg Casten is behind Profish, so the seafood is pristine. So big thank you to Greg and Dave and the whole team here because they keep my hot tea super hot and ready for me because I drink that stuff like it's going out of style. And they just accommodated my team and were terrific. So I'm very fortunate that they were here to join me. So let's get into today's show. So Greg was supposed to join us. I don't know, he's not here. So next time, another time. But I am going to be chatting with the mayor of Nightlife here in DC, Salah Sapari. He and I met a while back. Gina DeCooney introduced us, and if you don't know Gina DeCooney, then you're clearly not in DC because everybody in DC knows Gina DeCooney. But how does one become a mayor of a Nightlife? I mean, because I got to be honest, this aging clever sounds like a dream job to me, like dancing on tables, doing shots, like all the things. But it can't be house music and shots all night, right? So I think Salah is going to burst my bubble and tell me that there's not really as much of that as I think. But he has a fascinating background. He's a DC native. He's a son of immigrants. He spent over a decade leading community outreach initiatives and engaging with the nightlife community. He's a former DC police officer. We're going to get into that. And he also made a run for a candidate for Ward 1 as DC's council
That's right.
seat. Now, he did not make it over the finish line. But all things happen for a reason, and I think we have proof of that when we get into it. So before I start talking to him, I don't want to waste his time because I'm so grateful that he's joining me here today. But I want to talk about where I've been because I've been to a lot of places. Although talking to Salah, he's been to a lot of places too. But I'm going to hit mine first. We can talk about his later. So first, brunch at Anjou. So now, if you know me, I go out for dinner an awful lot, and people also want to do lunch an awful lot. So on the weekends, brunch isn't something that normally happens for me because I'm just sort of done. But I did meet somebody for brunch this Sunday, and I went to Anjou, and that may be changing my conversation about brunch because the brunch at Anjou is on fire. I mean, you can't go wrong with any meal at Anjou. Angel Barretto and Danny Lee and Scott Journeau, know how to knock the ball out of the park. But I got to tell you about some of the things. First of all, there's a black garlic Caesar. And normally when I see a Caesar salad on a menu, I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe not. But I needed some greens. It was a Sunday. And the black garlic Caesar is delicious. We did get the burger, which is based off of short rib meat, which if you like a burger, this will blow your mind. But for me, the go-to dish, which is kind of a hungover dish, but I wasn't hungover in this particular instance, it's rice cakes, which are super chewy. It's like a gnocchi covered in a spicy mozzarella and dotted with a little bit of a tomato sauce. Oh my God, it was so good. So you have your notes. You should definitely check that out. Actually, this week was really cool because this Parisian journalist, Marie Saint Clemente, was in town. I met her on the top of the Pendry Hotel, Moonraker. It's also a terrific patio. Don't tell Greg Casten. With terrific views. And they actually have very good sushi. So I met her there. She is doing a 10-page spread on DC in the Figaro magazine. And she wanted to meet with locals to sort of get a bird's eye view of what's happening in DC these days. So I was very excited to be able to chat with her about what's happening in the city, the hospitality scene here, give her some amazing recommendations. She also had her photographer, Eric, there, who was lovely. And I don't know, maybe my picture is going to be in the Figaro in a couple of months. We'll just have to I'll have to see. Maybe I'll make my splash in Paris. Lastly, I was at the Latvian embassy last night because Michael Weissman has launched her new book. It's called The Rye Bread Marriage. She's a fascinating author. She has written multiple books. She is really the authority on third wave coffee, but she married a Latvian who makes rye bread. And it's a terrific story about the necessity of bread and what you need to have a successful marriage. Anyway, it was a really wonderful launch last night. A lot of the big names in town were there. Joe Nathan was there. Mark Furstenberg was there. Sally Swift was there. I was there. So really excited. And she will be joining me on a future show, as will Joe Nathan, coming up in a couple months. Okay, that's enough about me. So on October 18th, 2018, Mayor Bowser signed the Office and Commission of Nightlife Establishment Act of 2017, even though it was in 2018. I don't understand that, but I don't need to. Anyway, but what it did was establish the district's first Office of Nightlife and Culture. So now we know some of the previous persons who's had this role. Sean Townsend, who's a good friend, who's now the head of the RAMW. He was the originator there, and when the pandemic was happening, he and I were on the phone a lot, and he was on this show, and he was on Foodie and the Beast quite a lot, talking about what was happening. And aside from taking care of our city nightlife, you know, Salah is doing lots of other things. He's a very busy guy, so I'm just going to list off some of his things. He's a graduate of the Metropolitan Police Academy. He completed a fellowship in innovative policing at Georgetown Law Center, and the Program for Excellence in Municipal Management, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Through George Washington University. Okay, you have a lot of accolades. It's hard to keep it straight. And he is currently completing his master's degree in Homeland Security and National Defense at the Naval's Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. So boy is busy, and which is why I'm so grateful he's here with me today. Hi, Salah.
Hello.
So nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want some history first before we get into being the mayor of nightlife here in DC, because it sounds like a super sexy job.
It does.
And parts of it is. Let's be honest.
Yes, but I don't tell people that because I want them to think that I'm just working very hard every single day and never having a good time.
Okay, I won't tell anybody anything. So, a native of DC. Not a lot of people, my husband's a native of DC, but not a lot of people are. Tell me what that means for you.
Yes, certainly. So I am a native of the DMV. I grew up in Rockville, Maryland, so okay. I do have to make that distinction. Yeah, so close enough. But, you know, grew up on the Red Line. But, you know, DC's always been home. It's always been, you know, a place that I visited when I was a kid. You know, most of my college was in the area when I wasn't studying abroad. And I started working for the city government in 2016, and I moved into the city around the same time too. So, you know, it's the only city in the U.S. that I've lived in, let's say. So it's home. So, but what made you decide to go into city government? What were you doing that you, and policing? I mean, how did all of that come to be? Yeah, certainly. It was always a childhood dream to go into policing. You can find pictures of me as a kid dressing up as a police officer and whatnot. My parents raised us with a focus on service. And so my brother ended up going into the military. And then after I finished college, I thought, you know, this is something I'd like to, it's something I wanted to do as a kid. I'd kind of gotten away from it for a bit. And I said, you know, maybe it'll be something I do for 2 years or something like that, just to check it off the box. And but I have to ask, because as a first generation, was that hard for your parents? Well, I think. I mean, I love that they raised you with service. It's important, but were they like, not that kind of service? There was an element of that. I think my parents, you know, would be happy if we all had become doctors or lawyers or engineers. And I think with my brother Ori being in the military, 2 of us in the military probably would have been too much for them. So the compromise was joining the police department. And, you know, I think any mother worries about their child when they're in a line of work like policing or in the armed forces. The military, yes. But, you know, all things considered, they were happy that I had a job. Okay, that is a good point. So you decided to go, you finished college, you decided to go to the police academy. Yes. Can
can we talk about that experience a little bit? Because I feel that informs where you are today.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is layers.
Yes, certainly. The police academy. So I joined the Metropolitan Police Department end of 2016. Went through the police academy and the training.
How long is that?
It can be anywhere between 6 months and 9 months, depending on when you enter and the programs at the time. But mine was about 6.5 months. Ended up getting assigned to the 4th District, which is Petworth and north of Petworth, also the Parkview in that area as well. So that's where I was assigned, out of the 4th District substation, which is 750 Park Road, Northwest. That's when I joined the program at Georgetown, and a lot of that program was focused on kind of policing for the next century, community engagement, dealing with people who have mental health issues, drug addiction, those types of things. And so that's really where my interest lied. And then at a certain point...
But was that a part of the DC Police Department's focus?
So DC had put together this program in conjunction with Georgetown to really think about how do we prepare young in their career, not necessarily young people, for whatever policing has to become, which is very different than what it has been.
Right.
And so that ended up being a program that I really enjoyed and got to meet a lot of people, not only from academia, but from the business community in DC as well. And so in end of 2018, I got the opportunity to come down to headquarters and run all of our volunteer programs, our reserve program.
So you went from the streets to administrative.
Yes.
That sounds like an interesting jump that not everybody has access to. So can we talk about how you were able to do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was part of being part of this program, the fellowship, but also I tried to do a lot of community things, even as an officer, hosting different events with the local advisory neighborhood commissioners. My background was in community engagement. Even throughout college, I worked in youth empowerment programs in the U.S. and also in South America and in the Middle East. And so having the experience of doing that and then the experience of being an officer on the street doing police work almost was a natural fit to be now in an office or create an office that was really focused on community engagement through volunteer programs, through our internship program, domestic violence liaison program, reserve program, running our community engagement academy, which really part of that is bridging, being at the intersection between the realities of government and then also the realities of what communities demand of government.
Right.
Which a different context in policing, but it's not much different than what my current job is, which is helping bridge the relationships between government and people doing work in the hospitality industry.
Well, no, I think you have a really good point, except the only thing I think that a lot of people struggle with when it comes to policing, right? I mean, there's so many layers, obviously, but you specifically brought up like mental health issues, crime. I mean, there's a crime issue right now, all those things. Finding that balance, finding the policeman who can help with crime and finding the policeman who can help with mental health. Do you know what I mean? And those who can help with youth, it's a very wide. The scope of work is very wide for the police department. And the question is are the programs and the people there who can answer what those needs are? Yeah.
And I think it's not just within the police department. It's the government as a whole has a lot of programs, a lot of personnel that are focused on, whether it's drug addiction or mental health. And having people that have a ability to navigate the bureaucracy and have a textured understanding of government is very helpful, even in a role like this where you may have a restaurant that is dealing with a public safety issue, or maybe you have a restaurant that's dealing with someone who unfortunately is struggling with mental health that's bothering patrons. How do you have an appropriate response for both of those, but you also have to respond to both of those?
Of course. Yeah. Well, okay, so you're jumping ahead, but then let's do that. So I do want to talk about, because you did run for office.
I did, yes.
How old were you?
I was 30.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was 2022.
Okay. Yeah. And so in the pandemic, what was it that you were doing that you were like, and now it's time for me to run for office?
So when I was at headquarters, I continued to move up with responsibility. So I didn't just have volunteer services. I then had marketing and recruiting. I was chief of staff over our professional development bureau, which oversaw training and human resources, basically everything that had to deal with someone's career from recruiting to retirement. And then when Chief Conti became the chief, I was his special assistant and his body man.
Okay.
And, so many of the conversations from 2020 onwards were, what's the future of policing? How do we work? How do we have a better government response as a whole to crisis in the community, or to just people calling for service to 911? So at a certain point, I thought, well, there's only so much I can do within the police department because our scope is what it is and our resources are what they are. And I thought, why not run for office? If so many other people do it, why can't I?
I love that you did it. Well, not only that, it puts you in front of people in a very different way. Yeah. Right? So I applaud your efforts.
Thank you.
I know Greg Casten loved you.
I appreciate that.
He did, right? He told me he loved you. Anyway, okay, so then that doesn't happen. When does the mayor tap your shoulder?
So through the process of running is a great way to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about your community and meet a lot of people.
All right, so tell me about, what have we learned?
The great part was I really got a deeper dive into the issues that were affecting the hospitality industry, because I was able to meet with the Nightlife Council, the Restaurant Association, and really at that time understand what their issues are post-COVID. Because even though 2022, a lot of us thought we were post-COVID after a few months, the industry is still, even today, still struggling with the effects of COVID closures and the economy post-COVID.
Well, not even to jump ahead too much, but like, given all the funding that's going to dry up, 2024 is going to be a really rude awakening for lots of people.
Yes.
Right? And 2025.
Exactly. And so I think that was very beneficial in eventually taking on this job, is that I already had the relationships made in the industry. But the primary election was in June of 2022. The general election was November. And so the day after, or 2 days after the general election, after the mayor officially won her third term, she announced my appointment to be the Nightlife director.
And what did you think the job was? And what is the job? Like, so for people who are like, what's the job? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot, it's a sexy job title.
It's a really sexy job title.
I think a lot of people think we just go to events and attend openings and go to parties, and I don't tell anyone, but we do that. But also we do a lot of constituent services. So the way I see the work, it's really three buckets. The first one is constituent services. We're not a regulatory agency, so we don't have, people aren't coming to us for permits. But say you're a restaurant.
But people are coming to you and they're like, I can't get my permit.
Exactly. When people can't get something, or they're running into a roadblock, they need some creative thinking. Right. They come to us, and we're able to help make the connections within government to see what is possible, what can we do. And it's not just people who own restaurants or bars or nightclubs. It's also residents in those areas who might have concerns about noise or trash.
Well, I bet you have to do a lot of hand-holding on both sides, right? It's a very restaurants and bars, hospitality in general. It's a very diverse group of people doing things in a variety of different ways. And you're in a city, so all of it is residential, right? Yeah. So you have to find a way to make people happy. So what are some of the things that you've had to do within that? Yeah. Like making friends.
I mean, it's relationship management. And let's take, for example, noise. Noise is always a thing that happens that people complain about, whether residents or businesses. So we try to solve issues with some creative thinking outside the regulatory environment. So we've worked with venues to rework their sound systems or put them on different walls to work, to try to mitigate some of the issues.
People put foam under the table. Yes, whenever I'm in a loud restaurant and I don't feel the foam under the table, I'm like, put the foam under the table.
Yeah, and we even had one venue install a decibel reader within their restaurant because it's sometimes helpful too when people are complaining. You have some information that you say, well, actually the sound you're hearing is not above, the regulated
Well, because level. Also there's two issues. There's the sound of the crowd. Yeah. And then some places, and I'm sure I'm going to sound like an old lady here, but some places put that music up so high.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, you already have a good vibe. Like there's a crowd and I just want to hear the music.
Yeah.
I don't need to have it like forced upon me. And I don't want to scream with people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Unless I'm in a club or something like that, that's totally different. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by noise because I think everybody has a different interpretation of what that is.
Exactly. And I know, part of being a nightlife director, there's a cohort of us across the world and across the U.S. And we speak just to see what people are doing. And there's some cities that have actually installed decibel readers out in public, or they're mobile, because it gives people something to reference, whether it's too loud or not too loud, whatever is determined by the city.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. So do you get on the phone with these people like once a month or once a year or something like that?
There's an annual conference, and we text all the time, see what's going on, what are people dealing with, and it's a really great relationship to have with people, because also I get a lot of good recommendations when I travel to other cities.
I'm leaving at the end of the week for Barcelona. I'm gonna see what you know.
Yeah. Oh, Barcelona just got their first Nightlife office.
Oh, yeah, my goodness.
Maybe 2 months ago they announced
isn't that great?
Yeah.
My daughter is there right now. So anyway, so we understand noise.
Yeah.
So let's talk about safety, because given your policing background, I would assume you have a very keen look into what is happening in DC the last year, especially. There's been an uptick in crime, but what's interesting is the kind of crime that it is, right? It's not what we think of as classic crime. It's a lot of young kids, carjackings, and the smash and grab at Chanel is my that story always blows my mind. But that is affecting restaurants. It's affecting people coming into the city. My parents called me from Philadelphia because there was a story on CNN. They're like, "Is it that dangerous there?" I'm like, "Is it that dangerous in Philadelphia?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, the crime is no different anywhere else. But you have to be smart and bright. So how do you facilitate that with the restaurants to help them make sure that they feel safe, their employees feel safe, but also that people coming into town or people who live here feel safe on the streets?
Yes. It's not lost on us that people have been, complaining, and not just complaining, rightfully bringing up issues related to public safety over the last year and a half or so. Because we have seen an increase in carjackings, we saw an increase in homicides, and any crime, if you're the victim of a crime, is one too many.
Right.
But recently, the mayor and the council passed Secure DC, which is a bill that level sets some of the changes in the ecosystem to respond to the trends we're seeing.
Okay.
And I think we're even seeing a positive outcome. That's only been law for 2 weeks.
Right.
And
I was going to say, it just happened, right?
We're already seeing some positive trends there.
But what is it? What's in that law? Can you explain that a little bit?
There's a lot in the law, but I'll go through a few
how it
things.
relates to
this. Certainly. So, one thing that we've seen is that, in the case of, someone committing a crime, they might be arrested and they might get released pending their trial. If it's a violent crime now, under certain conditions, they can be held, because it's a pretty common trend that person who is arrested for a violent crime, then while they're waiting for their next
does
trial,
another violent crime.
Right. So that's one element of it. There's another element about collecting DNA samples from arrestees. Part of that is to ensure that there's a case that's not been closed and they have DNA evidence, they're able to connect it and close, a series of robberies or a series of violent crimes, something like that. So that's an element. There's also a drug-free zone.
Right. I've seen a lot about that. And what does that actually mean?
Yeah, and you know, because a lot of people say, well, aren't drugs already illegal? And the difference is that in DC we don't have a loitering law, so you can hang out wherever you want, and there's nothing that the authorities can do to move you along. Mm-hmm. Now we know in certain areas people are dealing drugs,
right?
And it's a common complaint businesses, restaurants.
But can we go back to that when you say dealing drugs? Because marijuana is legal.
Marijuana is decriminalized. So you cannot actually.
I can't buy it on the street.
You can't buy it on the street. You can't consume it on the street.
Does everybody know that? Because it smells like that everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's also a pungent smell, but but I will say, you know, marijuana is can be an issue. There's other drugs as well, mm-hmm. and so regardless whether marijuana or another drug, dealing it on the street is illegal. But often to be able to actually catch someone in the act, you either have to have an undercover operation or you need to be there observing it. Even though any of us could probably say, you know, if you own a restaurant there, you can say that this is basically an open air drug market. Now, what the drug-free zone allows authorities to do is to designate an area where they can ask people to move along.
To disperse. Gotcha.
If they have reason to believe they're up to nefarious things. So it's an additional tool to, you know, interrupt the drug sales that are causing issues around certain neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing positive effects already with several of the drug-free zones that have been instituted.
Well, I mean, that is good news. I guess part of my question is the deterrent, mm-hmm. right? Especially for, you have, in my opinion, two issues, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have the crimes that are happening, but then you have these young kids who are behind the carjackings. You know, these are young people who have gone through, you know, the pandemic mm-hmm. and dealing with everything that's gone on there. And there seems to be a lack of care. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a lack of concern of what the repercussions are, if there are repercussions at all. So the question is what can the government do? I know this may be outside of your wheelhouse, but I can't help but ask it.
Yeah.
What can the government do to help those kids?
Yeah.
Because they shouldn't live in a space where they don't care.
Yeah.
You know, what can be done? What kind of community activations? What kind of involvement can the government have? And the hospitality industry, quite frankly, because the hospitality industry is really looking for workers.
Yeah.
And streamlining these young kids into a career where they could really do well.
Yeah, yeah.
Be safe, make a living, live a healthy life, hopefully. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how can everybody work together on that?
I think, you know, and this really gets into the second bucket of work, which is policy and task forces mm-hmm. and advising on what we can do as a city. I think, you know, with the crimes like carjackings and, you know, the auto thefts that we saw spike in, a lot mm-hmm. of those follow trends online. So they're kind of social media trends that we don't really even understand yet.
So kids are seeing kids hijack people and they're like, that sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not even, I don't think we have a full grasp on the emergence of this. You know, I think it's easy to say, oh, this is all post-pandemic stuff. And for sure, there is a connection there.
Sure.
But why have these like TikTok, Instagram challenges led to an emergence across the country of carjackings and auto thefts? It's hard to say. That being said... No.
I don't think it's hard to say. It's viral.
Yeah.
It's viral for a reason. If you can make a stupid makeup trend or something like that viral, you can do it. It can be nefarious as well,
of
right?
Course, yeah.
So that does make sense. I didn't think of that.
And we do know that the greatest deterrent for criminal acts is when there's a swift arrest and prosecution.
Right.
And so part of the Secure DC Act is to ensure that the law enforcement and all the other players in the public safety space have the tools and policies in place to be able to ensure that in the case of a violent act, someone can be arrested and prosecuted accordingly. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't answer the part of your question about what can we do as a city for kids to make sure they're in an environment. So
that they don't do that to begin with. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think when you're you just don't feel like anybody cares.
Yeah.
You know, they're just too young to have given up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I will say that, DC is a leader in many fronts. I mean, we have universal pre-K in DC, which is a huge benefit.
Yes.
To parents, because that's probably $20,000 in childcare that you don't have to pay if you're sending your kids to pre-K. We have, of all urban school systems, ours is the one that's progressing the fastest. That doesn't mean there's not more to do. Post-pandemic has been a struggle to get people back into school, and that's across the board.
Right.
So there's more work to be done there. But DC has a lot of opportunities. We have summer jobs programs for middle school and high school students, even into college. We have part-time cadet programs in our police department, our fire department, where you can get your school paid for, and you can get a salary of up to $40,000 to work for the city with the benefits. That's transformational. So there are opportunities out there, and I think one thing that you mentioned was, what can the hospitality industry do when we're looking for workers? And I think there are ways to get plugged in with city services to offer, if you have jobs, to offer them to people who might be looking for them.
Right.
And I know the Restaurant Association has worked with the deputy mayor for planning and economic development to launch the DC Food Jobs, or Food Jobs DC, as a portal for people to connect workers with opportunities. We also have the Carlos Rosario Public Charter School is, I believe it's the first, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. They've got, I believe, the first adult education culinary institute in the United States, here in DC.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, there are natural places to build pipelines for people who want to go into hospitality, whether it's restaurants, bartending, whatnot.
Well, what I always say about hospitality, it's no different than like the movie business or politics, right? Not everybody gets to be the president. Sometimes you have to be behind the president, right? Not everybody gets to be right in front of the camera. Sometimes you're the person holding the camera.
Exactly.
And I feel the same thing is very true in the hospitality industry. Like the chef gets all the chef and the bartender get all the glory, but there's all these people propping them up. And, it's an incredible career if you're looking for one, if you're not sure what you want to do. I think the hospitality industry, it's so embracive and it's so diverse and it's so accepting of so many different people and cultures. That's why I find it to be an incredible place for people who maybe don't know what they want to do. It's a great direction, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, what's bucket number 3?
Bucket number 3 is the fun stuff. It's the anniversaries, the openings, the hyping up DC's culture, our brands, attracting new things. So that's the fun part.
Yeah, but what does that? Okay, but what does that look like? Like, what does that mean for? If somebody's like, I want to be mayor of Nightlife, you have to know policy. You have to know how to work with people. But let's talk about the fun stuff a little bit. Like, what does that mean for you? As far as going out and shaking hands and kissing babies.
So it can be the shaking hands and kissing babies. It can be making connections between people to make sure that, amazing things are happening in the city. For example, our local music is go-go music.
Right.
So we partnered with the National Independent Venue Association, which has 23 venues, members here in DC. Back in July, and so we hosted a go-go gala as part of their conference. So we got to show go-go off to 1,000 bookers and venues owners who came from all across the country right here at the Anthem.
Now, is that something you guys coordinated? Like, is that initiatives that you're pushing, or is that things that people are like, hey, can you?
It's both. It's a mix of people coming to us saying, hey, we'd like to do our conference here. Can you do a letter of support? And we say, we would love to do a letter of support. Can we do a go-go gala? That type of, seeing where can we find places to work together. Another thing that we're working on right now with the French embassy is the Olympics are going to be in Paris.
Right.
So we're working with them to find a location here in the city to do a opening ceremony and watch party while the Olympics are opening up in France.
Yeah, I want an invite to that. That sounds fun.
You will get an invite. So
that sounds fun.
A lot of it is connecting dots and just seeing what is possible between people who are already doing amazing things in the city.
Well, there's to me, like, the city is really at an interesting place. And in fact, when I was out with that journalist from Paris, her questions were so interesting because there is a misconception about DC that it really is about everything going on in Capitol Hill. And I'm like, that's
this.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Capitol Hill this is the seat of power, like agreed, and like there's all that happening. But most of the people who live in the city are maybe some are adjacent to politics because they're lawyers or engineers or, you know, in some vein. But like there is a whole cultural scene here, retail, restaurants, real estate, all these things that have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, if you say DC is no longer a steak town, I'm like, somebody might hurt you. Like it is, you know, the New York Times, every time they write an article about DC, it's like, it's no longer a steak town. It's like, yeah, I know. It hasn't been a steak town in a really long time. Yeah. So how do you guys also get out there to help promote, you know, not just locally, but nationally, what's happening in the DC region?
Yeah, so we work with our, you know, we have great partners at Destination DC. We have great partners at Events DC. Even within government, we've got the Commission on Arts and Humanities, which has done activations at South by Southwest, out in LA and in Miami. We've got our Department of Small and Local Business Development, which is the same. We have a lot of agencies that are focused on promoting DC. And, you know, one thing, you know, people as you said, people mistake DC as just a federal town.
Right.
And it's not to discount it. Because of it is the capital of the United States, we are the most important city in the world.
Right.
So that means a lot of people come to DC as tourists, for conferences, for lobbying and whatnot. But people forget there's also 700,000 people that call this place home.
Right.
And has its own unique
And that
flavor.
doesn't even really include like the circle outside.
Yeah, which
right?
Is
like
several
when people
million.
Right. Like when people ask where I'm from, I say DC.
Yeah.
I mean, my residence is in Kensington, Maryland, but I'm in the DC. I'm in the DMV. Like that's how I feel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I mean, I think part of it is exposing people when they come here to what we're doing, like we did with the Go-Go Gala,
which I love.
Part of it is working with our partners to advertise things that are happening in the city, which we do, which, you know, we're very good at with, you know, Cherry Blossom Festival and all of the different things that happen at the National Mall. And what we really hope to do is help get people out of just the federal footprint. You know, if they're coming down to the National Mall, that's great, but we hope they'll
stay in the restaurant.
Yeah, stay in the restaurant. Go see what downtown has to offer.
Agreed. Okay, so let's talk about what you're seeing around the city in trends, right? Like we were talking off air about some of these new clubs that are opening, some of these new transplant restaurants that are opening. What are you seeing? What are you liking? What are you not liking? I'm just sort of curious.
Yeah, there are a lot of great places that are opening. You know, when I look at downtown, for example, and downtown I like to look at because...
And when you say downtown, how do you describe downtown? Because I feel like DC, people think of downtown in different ways, right?
I would say south of DuPont Circle.
Okay.
All the way to the White House, stretching across to
like
Union
Shaw?
Station.
Yeah, okay,
that
past
area.
that area.
Past the convention center.
That's fair.
Roughly that area.
Okay.
I mean, it's different definitions for different people because you could put, for example, the downtown bid and the Golden Triangle bid together and just call downtown. But regardless, when
don't forget Kenyatta.
Yeah, and
seriously.
Mount Vernon's bid as well. So if you if you look at that area, since 2020, we see there's been about 30 restaurant closings. In that same period of time,
how many restaurant openings?
33 have opened.
Yeah,
and we know already restaurant industry is a tough industry, regardless. I mean, take COVID out of the picture. So I think those trends are good. There's going to be a resurgence of downtown. We know already. Yesterday, the mayor and Ted Leonsis signed the deal to keep Monumental Sports in DC, which is huge.
We're very excited.
Downtown.
Very excited.
And there's going to be a total reimagining of something that we've all loved, Capital One Arena. We also know that in that area that we described, there's only about 500 residences, and the mayor is intent on bringing 15,000 new residents to downtown, and that's going to already transform.
Wait, there's only 500 residences in Penn Quarter?
So if you look at not full downtown, but if you look at between south of DuPont down to about the White House, there's only about 500 residents.
Okay, because I think of that as more office spacey, right?
Yeah.
But then as you move over to Penn Quarter, there's quite a few residences.
Yeah, if you move east, there's more residences.
Yeah.
But if you look at that western portion of downtown, there's only about 500 residences, which, the goal is to bring a total of 15,000 residents down to downtown, that means you're going to have grocery, retail, the restaurants there are going to benefit. That's probably going to bring in more restaurants.
Sure.
And, while downtown hasn't returned to the same economic levels of activity that pre-pandemic,
sure.
If you look at other neighborhoods like Adams Morgan, if you look at Union Market, areas that didn't have, say, a lunch rush have one now. So the economic data there looks really good.
It's really funny. So I just want to tell you, when Penn Quarter was really hot, like in the aughts, even then, lunch was an issue. There were a couple of restaurants that really brought them in for lunch. But a bulk of them just didn't. DC is not the lunch town that everybody thinks it is, or was perhaps. But what I do think is interesting is that if you are in a more residential area, places that never did lunch because there wasn't anybody there to give lunch to, are now people want to get out of their house. So they do go out for lunch. So there is a yin and yang to it, right? And I think the hardest part, and you know this better than I do, is servicing the people who built their businesses in the area. And they're like, no. I built my restaurant here to do lunch, and now there's nobody here for lunch, right? So servicing those people and making sure that they can be successful.
Exactly. And I think that's some of the wisdom behind bringing more residents to downtown, is that we see in other areas where people were living, that the businesses have been able to transition to cater to the needs of residents who are already there.
Right.
That can only benefit downtown when it is more reflective of some of the other neighborhoods that having residents living there who need a grocery store, who need all the amenities.
I applaud all of that. I think it's really, really exciting. But your area is broader than just that area. Like when I think of the Union Market District, I'm always so blown away by it because it was truly warehouses, and now it's this very sexy area. But when you're doing all your work and sort of helping all these people, there's so many different needs. What are some of the ones that have come up that you're just like, I got to figure out how to help them, or do you know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking of crime, even though I feel like we talked about it, but if we could twist just a little bit, like the mental health issues for those, there are, under that bridge over there, there is people living in tents. Do you know what I mean? So does that fall under your purview, or because I assume you would hear from restaurants like, there's somebody here, they come here every day, we're trying to help them, but we don't have the capacity. Like, who do you call?
So yes and no, because I kind of see my role as a conduit for the hospitality industry to then find the right person within government who's dealing with that. So if it's dealing with the unhoused population, because maybe we need to offer people to get into a shelter, or we need to do a biohazard cleaning or something like that. Restaurants, people who live in a nightlife area might come to me, and then what I do is go to the relevant cluster of agencies like the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services to see what's our capacity to deal with this. We've actually formed a few neighborhood task forces to deal with that specific issue. We've worked with not only residents but also the businesses to see what can we do. A great example is on T Street and by the Howard Theater. We've worked with the Howard Theater to get these I wouldn't call them a porta potty, but they're like a little bit glorified porta potties that are cleaned and maintained, so people who don't have a place to use the restroom aren't necessarily using it right outside of your restaurant. They have a place to go now. And
has that been successful?
I think it's too early to say,
because it does sound like the right idea. Providing people dignity, right? Like when they maybe don't have it themselves.
Exactly.
Like giving people a place to use the restroom is probably a step in the right direction.
And the key is that it can't just be a restroom that's not serviced, that's not monitored. And so we've partnered with another nonprofit that provides interventions to people who are dealing with drug addiction or mental health issues. And so they're able then to work with people who on a constant basis develop relationships to get them into the care they need. So it's not an easy process. I think we'll see where the trend goes. But we're trying things, and that's one way that we kind of step in as a conduit to make connections, build partnerships.
Well, I think you have to try it,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And invest in the time of it. I want to ask, just lastly, about Initiative 82,
Mm-hmm.
tipped wages. How does that affect your line of work? Do you get a lot of people checking in with you? It's all over the map still to this day, and it's going to take some time. So where do you stand on it, and how do you help affect change for those who have questions?
So my office is part of the Tipped Worker Coordinating Council, which was brought into being after the first go at eliminating the tip credit was repealed by the council.
Initiative 77.
Initiative 77. Yeah. So Initiative 82 passed in 2022. Mm-hmm. The way it was written was to kind of have a phased-in approach, which from my conversations with the industry was like, it's really hard to reevaluate our business model every single year. Mm-hmm. So it looks like it'll be brought in all at one go, it kind of not in a delayed format, but rather than one increase of $1 here, $1 there, will go to the full minimum wage.
Right.
Now, that gives the industry a time to adjust and figure out exactly what their model is. But it is definitely a big impact on the industry, because while in the past
it's a huge impact on the industry.
It's a huge impact because there's elements to, if I were to tip a worker, if I leave a tip for my waiter now, that tip is going directly to the waiter. Now, it'll go through the restaurant, which has additional fees associated with it. That's
the
taxed.
Whole right now. There's all these issues about service fees. Mm-hmm. I feel like it got all murky.
Yeah.
Like when you travel to France or Spain, like when you travel to Europe, it's all included.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's no figuring out tip. Everything is all set and done. So I don't know why we struggle so much with this.
Well, I think as Americans, we struggle as doing anything as an entire nation.
So that's a good point.
Yeah, so each jurisdiction is kind of figuring out what they want to do. Some have eliminated it, some have not. I think it's definitely going to be an adjustment. It's going to be a struggle, mm-hmm. Because it does increase operating costs. Because like I was saying, if that money is now passing through the restaurant, that's taxable. A lot of restaurants in their lease agreements have some type of profit sharing with the landlord. So that takes some of that, 20% out. And so those are things that have to be worked out, and there's legislative efforts to do that. But I think at the same time, like,
they'll get used to it.
Yeah, we will get through it. The industry will sort it out.
I agree.
And I don't want to discount that it's going to be a tough time.
Yes.
Because margins are small, inflation is a real thing. But part of our work with the Tip Coordinating Council is to make sure we have a robust education campaign when the initiative is fully implemented, so people know what is the status of tipping in DC.
No, I agree with you. And honestly, I think, because I'm sure you've been at a table where somebody has said, well, I didn't think our service was so great, so I'm going to leave them. I'm not going to leave much of a tip, or I'm not going to tip at all. And I that's not in my world.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 20 plus all the time, but I think taking that off the table is kind of better. Why do we, if I go to a doctor's office, I don't tip my doctor.
Yeah.
So I think I'm hoping that it winds up being better. I know it's going to change for a lot of people in the service industry, the kind of money that they're making and how they make it. But I'm hoping the balance of paid vacation, healthcare, things of that, sick days, things of that nature, even it out a bit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because so many people in the hospitality industry don't have healthcare, don't have vacation days, don't have sick days. Like, they don't work.
Yeah.
They don't make any money. So I'm hoping that it does even out.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that we will eventually get there. And when we do, I think it might surprise us with how good it could be.
Okay, good. All right. We're going to wrap up.
Okay.
Before we do, give me 3 places that you've been to lately that you're like, I can't wait to go back.
Okay. Well, I just went to, like I was telling you, Barrios Astoria,
right?
Greek spot, which you've got to check out because at like 10 or 11 p.m. they bring out napkins and it's a great celebration. I was just there for Greek Independence Day on Monday.
Okay.
So I love it there. It's the potato lemon wedges.
Right. I didn't try those, so I will try those next time. Okay.
Then I was recently down at Zoo's for their opening.
The new club. Is it a club or a cocktail bar?
Cocktail lounge. The brothers who own Urban Roast are behind it. So some of the best espresso martinis I've ever had are from there. So I would recommend checking it out. And you said 3, right?
Yeah, give me one more.
Someplace that I've recently been. Well, I did check out Pastis in Union Market, which was great. I know they're connected to Le Diplomat, but I was a little sad they did not have the cranberry bread, which is my favorite from Le Diplomat.
I have to be honest, just so you know, I was so thrilled it wasn't there because that is like a kryptonite for me. I mean, I just have no resolve. I'm like, screw it, I'm eating the bread. No, my problem with Pastis is the fries.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah. Well, I have got to add one more because I also went to Pape on 14th Street, Indian restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Which I love.
I haven't been there in a while.
And the owner is opening up a Persian style place, on Union Market. So that'll be coming down.
Persian is back. You got June in McLean and Saeed is opening up Namak. Up in the old Mintwood place. So I'm excited. Good. All right. Very, very good. Okay. All right. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me online. My handle is CZAPARY, Twitter and Instagram. That's my last name. But also DC Monk, DCMONC, Twitter and Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just stay with me for a minute while I wrap up. So I want to thank Salah for all of his time today. It was just so amazing to have this time and hear all these things. And it gives everybody such a better understanding of the city and how it works. And I think the more you know, the better your experience wherever you go. I always say do your homework. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. A fond farewell to being here at Tony and Joe's. Again, a thanks to Greg Casten and his team for hosting us for the last month. There is so much incredible stuff going on out there. Go to thelistareyouonit.com, the online e-zine that tells you everything happening, not just what you heard here on the show today, but all over the DC metro area. Of course, you want to follow me at NYCCINELLIS on all the platforms, including YouTube. So if you're listening to this, you can also watch it. Tune in every Sunday to Foodie and the Beast at 11 a.m. on 1500. And I think I've hit it all. So thanks again for joining me. Be safe out there and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.